Jim Taylor is a weaver and a wisdom elder with Illuman, a men's organization started by Richard Rohr back in 1998. And Jim weaves men's rite of passage, helping young men and elder men get into adult conversation among themselves, as well as with the whole world. Jim is also a wilderness guide and a former pastor. In his book on male initiation, Richard Rohr writes that the male initiation has been practiced in all cultures with the belief that an inexperienced man is a danger not only to himself, but to society as a whole, because he does not know how to adequately express his abilities, above all his power. My name is Georgs Rubenis, and this is the Spiritual Practices, How to Find the Right One. Conversations with people about our choices, about how we choose our life paths, and how we create our unique life patterns, gradually becoming authentic beings. Yeah. Hello, Jim.
How you doing, brother?
Yeah, thanks. Fine. Yeah. Maybe we could start with a question. What does it mean for you to be a man?
Well, that is a loaded question, isn't it? It's probably one that men are most confused in trying to answer these days. It's, you know, our popular culture has an answer, but it doesn't seem to serve us too well. I think being a man in this world is not different than any other gender or really anything else in the world. It's being grounded, you know, in your humanity, in your place in the world, in the family of things, as Mary Oliver would say, and to be moving through the world in a way, particularly for men, that's generative. We say that others can thrive around you, in front of you, and in your wake, what you leave behind you, and it would require, you know, a host of things you might want to describe about authenticity, integrity, and love and compassion. But those are things that are desperately needed for a man to become generative, you know. So that's a short stab at a big question.
Yes, so to some extent that means that what you're saying is that man is not something how we born, but this is something that we become.
I think so. You know, there's been such a bifurcation, like men and women, you know, are so different. And I think there are differences that are worth noting, and differences in ways that we might find our true selves, that are helpful to us. But at the end of the day, I think once you get down the journey, you start to find those differences coming more and more together. You know, and when it comes together, you find we all have the same work to do, to discover our true selves, who we are in this world, and what is ours to do. But we have to start in that journey wherever we are, and so sometimes you have to start where the differences are here, you know, wide, and you start where you are, male or female, and then you move on that journey, and slowly but surely they start to come together. The practices are the same eventually, but again, you might have to start out here at first. So it's not an easy, I don't think there's necessarily one answer for that, but it is, the culmination of it is the same.
Yeah, and usually before we start to choose that path, so we are living, let's say, this first part of our lives when we are more focused on what's happening outside, in the outer world, and only at one specific moment or after some series of events we start to look inside. Maybe can you a little bit describe what was this the turning moment for yourself?
Oh, for me, wow, yeah. So my journey started early. I grew up in a home that was very dysfunctional, broken. Both my parents were alcoholics, and you know, they were so busy fighting their own demons, you know, they hardly noticed me and my sisters. And it was traumatic. You know, I saw my mother shoot my dad when I was 6 years old. And it didn't kill him, but it was a violent trauma to me. And I made a promise at 6 years old that I would never live like this, but I didn't know how. But it started, I say it started my spiritual journey. 2 years later, my mom took her own life. And again, the trauma deepened. And my response to that was, I cried out to God. My parents weren't part of a church or anything like that, but somehow, you know, in my desperation as a little boy, my desperation was so big, I needed a big answer. And so I cried out to God, and sure enough, God was there. I felt His presence reassuring me that I had a place in this world. But again, I didn't really know how to actualize that, to really, you know, lean into it. So I just did what a lot of young boys and girls do in those kind of situations. I just tried hard, you know, and so I set up the standard for my life. I'll just try harder than everybody else, and maybe that'll get me what, you know, what I longed for, which was to be loved, you know, to be part of this world, to belong. And so I made straight A's, you know, and everything a young person would do. Yeah, I followed all the rules. I was a good boy. And I really did believe that if I tried hard enough and I was good enough, people would love me and they would accept me. And of course, it didn't work out that way. You know, people are all suffering their own woundedness. And many times they don't notice each other's wounds because they're so consumed with their own. So I was missed in a lot of it until I was 14, when I first had someone approach me about if I had a relationship with God or not. And that what led me to entering into the church. And the church captured me, I say. And I was perfect. I was a perfect, you know, candidate for the church because I was wounded. I was desperate. I really wanted to know how to move into the world in a way where the best parts of me would come forward, and that I could find a people, you know, who would love me. And so I went through that, you know, whatever they told me to do, I did it for a long time. And so that's how I got started.
Yeah, it's usually not easy for children in that age to experience.
And no help, you know, there was no help whatsoever. I often say to men now, if there had only been an elder who could have leaned into my life at that point in time, it could have rescued me from a lot of years of pain that wasn't necessarily needful. I hate to say it wasn't helpful. Richard Rohr says that everything belongs, you know, and so I look back and I know that part of what makes me the compassionate man that I am is my own woundedness, you know, and it's close to the surface. I can experience that pain of that little boy, that I am no longer him, but I can experience his pain. I can see it and feel it, taste it, and then I can look out and I know that people are suffering just like me. And so there's just a huge amount of compassion and longing for them, and a desire to be a healthy elder that can come alongside, you know, other men and help them in their spiritual path. And I think a lot of our work in Illumin is that communal desire to support one another in a spiritual journey that's leading us to what Bill Plotkin calls wholeness. So.
Yeah. And so looking back at you when you were this 14-year-old young man, and thinking from your today's perspective, you think, is there or are there any keys or actions what one could do in order to work better with such heavy traumas and with such heavy wounds.
When you're young like that? Yeah. Well, you know, the traditions have always realized that community is critical, right? Healthy community. And it's probably the one thing we're most desperate for in this world. Even if you go into a spiritual community with that intention, we often find it's not as healthy as we thought. And it's like a mixture of all the traumas of everyone, and they just get stirred up, you know, and we kind of talk at it, but not really move into what would be necessary to transform the wound. Richard has a phrase that he taught us that if you don't transform your pain, you will always transmit it, which is what is wrong with a lot of our masculinity, where we get toxic masculinity from, is these are men who have not been able to transform their own pain, and so they are transmitting it wherever they go, oftentimes completely unaware. So, you know, first order for healing is to be with people who are participating in the healing of the world and ourselves. And that would be a healthy community. I just don't have much confidence that you can do this alone. But if you don't have, you know, so it's like this trajectory I talked about. If you're out here and you don't have anyone that you can partner with in that journey, which is true of me, I didn't have it. And so what I turned to what we would say our higher power. I turned to God. I looked outside myself for the possibility, for the support and strength to stay at the journey, to stay with it. The mistake I made was that it was all about me now. I got to try really hard and get it all right, and if I get it right, somehow God will be pleased with me, and maybe you might too, and now I've found my place in the world. That might be a place that we have to start, but it can't be the conclusion. It's not gonna. It prepares us for things like grace, forgiveness, compassion, but and hope. I'm not sure you can find those graces at the beginning, you know. So for young people, it is challenging, but the best thing I could say is that somehow we bring them into healthy relationships with other elders, men and women, who can mirror to them what it looks like to be whole. And what they would see in a healthy adult, a healthy elder, is vulnerability. They would see their tears. They would be able to overhear their own woundedness that they carry. And you're already seeing how far away we are from that. Yeah. So the masks would come off, the false self, as Merton called it, and the true self would start to come forward. And in a community like that, and the young people could witness it, even though they might not be able to start there. They know that that's part of the really real spiritual journey.
Yeah, already for several times you have mentioned community. And it's nevertheless so because you are in such a community as you have already described. Can you say what was your path, how you find Illuman and how you find Richard Rohr and his work?
Well, so I kept running. 14, the church got me. I just started jumping through all their hoops, and I really still had that longing. How can I find my place in this world? How can I find love and meaning and significance? And my core wound was driving me all the time, which was basically, you're not lovable, Jim. You're not good enough. And no matter how hard you try, they're going to find out. And so that was always informing me from, deep inside. And my solution was to just keep trying harder. And I did that for a lot of years, all the way up into, all through my undergraduate work at the university. I was involved in leadership and organizations. My tradition was Christian organizations, and I was a youth minister working with young people while I was in college, high school kids, just a little bit younger than me. And then I went as a missionary right after I graduated from university, 2 years to Yugoslavia. And it was then I came back and went to seminary, and I was there 10 years. I did my Master's of Divinity, my Master's of Theology, and PhD in Systematic Theology. But I'm still just jumping through the hoops, you know, and thinking that I could arrive at some place that all these things just kind of happened to me. And sort of a long story short there, I became disillusioned. There was this awareness that all of the groups of people I happened to be with, and this is including in the seminary, where you think the highest theological perspectives, you would think that would be the greatest realization of your tradition, wouldn't you? The scholars who spend all of their rigor and time understanding Scripture, and that would be the place you would see it most realized, even better than the church, maybe. You know, it wasn't that way, not for me anyway. And so there was a disillusionment. I was kind of like, you know, the movie Wizard of Oz, when Toto the dog pulls back the curtain and there's a wizard. I mean, the guy's not a wizard, he's pulling all the things back there. And I felt like that. I was like, you're kidding me. I did all of this and you guys really don't know what you're talking about. It's all this talk about love and community and forgiveness and hope and compassion, grace. Yeah, we could talk about it as a theological construct, but where in the world does it show up? You know? And it was about that time. I was a young pastor, 42, and one of my buddies kept talking about this guy, Richard Rohr, you know, and I wasn't interested because he was a Catholic. I thought, man, what could he know? And he made me listen to one of his DVDs, you know, and I was so impressed and surprised and glad, you know, to hear him talking of, he was like describing my own interiority, my own story. And I truly was delighted, and I just listened to more of Richard, and he wasn't really ever saying anything. I shouldn't say that completely, but most of the things he was saying, I was already experiencing, and it was what was creating my own angst, this lack of realization of all the things that we talk about in my spiritual tradition. It just wasn't manifesting. And except for non-dual consciousness, that was a new one for me. We didn't have any idea of that, and I come from an evangelical tradition, and we did not talk about non-dual consciousness. But aside from that, most everything was pretty immediately accessible for me. And one of my friends started talking about going on this men's rite of passage. And again, I was not interested because I mean, I led retreats, you know, by that point in time. And I just thought, what in the world is a retreat going to help me with? And they wouldn't tell me what was involved. So I thought, I just imagined, well, there's going to be all these guys running around naked and getting in touch with their tears or something, rolling around in ashes and getting in touch with their tears. I didn't know what to think. Yeah. But I didn't want to do any of that. And but he finally convinced me to go, and fortunately it wasn't about that. And it was also the time I was introduced to this language of the false self and the true self. And that was a tuning fork. I knew, I recognized that there's this persona that is so fragile and desperate, longing to have the deep answers, but it can't give the deep answers to life. It's not equipped for that, the false self, the constructed self. It's the one that we put together in response to our deepest concerns, our deepest core wounds, our pain, our struggles. And this persona, this false self, we construct it as a way to protect ourselves, as a way to try to answer our, deepest longings. And if we pay attention to that construction, we'll get the answer. It's not sufficient. It doesn't really, we don't arrive at our deepest concerns, our deepest longing, our deepest significance in this world. It's always short. It's always shy of giving us that. And if we pay attention to that, we would go at some point, wow, this is not what I was made for. It might move us in first half life. Richard talks about first half life where you're constructing your tower, you're building your reputation, those are all good things, and we have to do that. But at some point, you really want to realize that's not what life is all about. There's a deeper conversation going on all the time, all around us, waiting for our attention. And when it has our attention, we will come into a possibility that we had not planned for up to that point. And so our job with the younger folks, they have to build their tower. They have to go through that constructed self. But what we want to do is try to help them build a healthy persona, a healthy ego, so that they can use their power for the common good. That's where the community comes in again. But it's literally everything. Everything is a part of our community. And use your power for the common good. And then the second half of life is really moving into the descent, where we start to make or come into a relationship with the true self, the deep self, more and more. It's more and more prominent. And the constructed self, we don't get rid of it, but we do become aware of that part of us that has thrived in, not necessarily thrived, but participated in that construction. And we're not driven, we're not asleep to it now. And so we can begin to have a different kind of conversation with the world. And I call it an adult conversation. That's a gift from David White, a poet in America. He's from Ireland, in the UK originally, his parents. But yeah, that's it.
But basically, yeah. So today we are in a spiritual retreat center, Stacija, and we are actually sitting in this historical station building here. And you were speaking about those two phases of life, and the one where we need to build something up, and then in other one where we need to actually, maybe tear it down, and to open up ourselves so we can be something more than just us, than just me. And this building also, at one point, this will be rebuilt as well.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
Yeah, and yeah. So tomorrow, you with your colleagues, you are starting to actually lead a program, Men's Rite of Passage here in Station. Yeah, what's that program is about, and who should be there?
Well, so this is a Men's Rite of Passage. We call it MROP. And this one is targeting second half life, but we generally have, I think we actually have a young man here as young as 28. It might be a little young for him, but he will still benefit, but it's not targeting his specific need. He'll get the Father's blessing. There will be a lot that he will get out of it. But I always tell the younger men, this is targeting older men in our community that haven't done this work at all. And we're still working to develop the first half life. We've got it, but it's not prolific enough that we'd tell him no. So we want him to come. So anyway, the ages are quite large now, 28 to 78, that might show up at this MROP. But it is targeting men in this age who have needed the support of other men to move into that, I keep calling it this adult relationship with everything, to move it into a mature way of moving through this world. And it's particularly important nowadays. We meet what authors have described as the man-child. He's 35 years old, he has a job, he's married, has children, he goes to work, he comes home and plays video games all night long. You know, he just hasn't quite been able to leave what the little boy syndrome behind, and doesn't know how to move into something that is deeper and more participatory in this world. And so in these rites, we try to help men to step into that. And so we do true self, false self work. We do grief work, because men who can't come in touch with their tears can't find compassion. All the indigenous wisdom has told us that. We do some shadow work, a lot of ritual, a lot of time in nature, because it's in nature that men can see, can be mirrored appropriately. A tree is not confused about being a tree, you know. There's nothing in creation that's confused about itself with a capital I. It is. And so if a man can sit in the forest and really be present, he will be mirrored. And the invitation is to find his true self in this world. We're the only part of creation that can deny itself. And so it's in that capacity that I think we encourage the listening to the teachers, as we call it, all around us, really begging us, human beings, to evolve, to become what we were meant to be.
Yeah, but I do not know how it is in the United States, but in Latvia, usually in most of retreats, the largest part who are present and who are here are women, not men.
Oh, right. Yeah, women seem to have always been more ready for that conversation. They intuit at a level that seems just more natural to move towards the relational. And I don't know all the reasons why, but you can observe it. You know, they are just often more readily prepared to have those kinds of conversations that are more vulnerable, and to unmask, to tell us their struggles, each other, and to go towards one another and support one another. Men have typically, you know, we hide from each other. Everything's great, how you doing? You know, we put on that false self, and even if you're really desperate, we're still bullshitting each other, is what we say in Texas, you know. It's just not honest, but we don't know any other way to be. We're terrified, in fact, to come clean, to really say, hey, you know, I'm afraid of getting old, or I'm so damn lonely, I don't know what to do with I don't have a true friend, I'm desperate. That you just don't typically hear that from men.
Yeah, and also thinking about what's happening here in Latvia, or that sentiment that was at least here maybe some 10 years ago. It was that if a man is looking for some sort of help, so that means that he's in some extent weak.
Yeah, he's weak.
Yeah.
Why don't you try harder?
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've done that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, it works in a way that to society's idea. They all said I was succeeding, you know, but I was lonely, I was insecure, I was not confident about my future, and worse, I bought into a way of thinking that I could arrive at the top without anyone else. And really, I didn't have to bring anyone with me. That's their job. My job is to go to the top, be the best that I can. And, you know, it certainly wasn't communal. And I had no respect for the more than human world. It was here for my own, I could use it however I wanted. And so, again, you see it as a young man using his power for himself. Yeah. Even though I was on a spiritual journey, I still was writing it all about me. And that's a difficult, I think it's difficult to convey that how different those two things are. But that's what the men's work helped me distinguish as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you spoke about yourself, yeah, how you get familiar with Mrop and these programs, and you have afterwards became a weaver.
Yes.
And you are now doing it here. And so, have you experienced, yeah, to what sort of men such an event would suit the best?
Oh, yeah.
And the second part of that question, does it work for all the guys who participate?
Well, I will say to the guys on the first day, I'll joke and say, most men survive, you know. Most men live through this week. But someone, you know, invariably they'll ask me, do you ever had anyone who died on one of these retreats? Because, you know, they don't know what's going to happen. It's a men's rite of passage. And I always say the same thing. Well, if we're fortunate, almost everyone. And that's that dying to the false self, you know. Yeah. You know, I can't hardly imagine a man who would come to this and find it like a waste of time. If a man comes, what would be the right candidate though? A man who's on a journey. He has some journey, spiritual journey that he's participated with, and he is at a place where he is ready, particularly in this second half life, for what he doesn't know yet. And this sense of becoming. And men arrive into a position oftentimes, we call it in second half life, where it is a large question mark. What am I supposed to do with myself now? I have these number of accomplishments, you know, and I have a resume, we say, in the U.S. Do you guys do resumes? Yeah. But you're looking at all of it, and your trophies and whatever, your successes, and you're like, it's not really bringing me alive. You know, is there more? And I think that's the man that is a candidate for a men's rite of passage in second half of life. And some men have done some reading, they know Merton, they know Richard Rohr, and they are aware of this true self, false self dichotomy. And they want to open themselves up more for this true self. This is another candidate. So we have clergy even, we have men from all fields, all walks of life. It's really not important. And often the ones who are the most surprised though were guys like me who thought, I've pretty much done I've checked off all the boxes. I've read all the right books. I have all the right spiritual practices. I've gone to church, I've gone to whatever. And I went and I was so shocked, Georg. I just was so shocked to participate for a week in a conversation that I was not able to have anywhere else. The church wasn't prepared to have it with me. There certainly weren't elders present in my life that were talking to me about my own grief, my own wounds. And so I was really fortunate to stumble into it. And, you know, I say I went through the door and I never have gone back out, you know. It has continued to spur me on in my spiritual life.
Yeah. Well, what would be your suggestion for men who are participating in this event? What to do next? Because usually, you know, sometimes we tend to participate in one or another retreat or program, and sometimes we, you know, have this spiritual booster, and we feel good, and then after a couple of days, you know, we are going back to our works.
The real world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the limiting factors of a lot of things we participate in, isn't it? I used to say about people in my own church that they would come in and I could give them the best sermon of my life, and really the best hope I could have in that setting is that I inspired them. Yeah. And that usually, I would say, Richard said this, it lasts until they hit the end of the parking lot. Yeah. You know, they're on their way out of the church, yeah, and they got to beat the Methodists to lunch, yeah, you know. and it's over. You inspired them for 15 minutes, you know, and then they're back to life that there wasn't a way to incorporate it other than some, like, don't do this, be good, don't do, you know, some mandates, but it wasn't something that brought me alive. In the rites, we say, number one, you have to continue the same practices, if I can use that language, that we had here at the MROP. To continue the conversation, why wouldn't you keep doing the exact same things that brought you into awareness when you leave? And the mistake, sometimes they'll think, well, I can't do this when I leave. But there's not a thing that we're doing really at the rites that once you leave, you're going, well, what did we do? And you can't really tell people because it's all sacred space. It's so amazingly powerful that if you try to talk about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense outside the rites. But at some point you do, you develop a language for it. And the language is this, well, you know what we did? We were still a lot of the time. We sat in nature and were quiet. And we practiced moving from the monkey mind to the heart and into the body for another way of knowing that's so much larger than just the head. Yeah. And we cultivate this practice all week long in various ways. And one of them is to be in nature, to be immersed, to be in the wild. And again, that mirroring begins to happen, and men move into a vulnerability that is not usual if they're in a building that they built themselves. Well, I built this building, there's nothing really that impressive here. In fact, I can see a few imperfections, you know. And that's how the monkey mind works. But you get out in nature, it's bigger than we are. And there's something that mystically starts to happen to us. Even in the silence, there's a conversation, right? Yeah. And so there's that piece, and then when we come back from that silence, we get in small groups of men, we call them council circles, and we have 4 intentions. We speak from the heart. Well, for a man to do that, again, he has to move out of the head, the calculating mind. And so if we say to the guys, if you're talking about your spiritual journey, or if you're explaining yourself, it's very likely that you're not speaking from the heart. You got to get into your story. So what's really going on with you? And that's going to bring a part of you forward that is very different than that talking. So I read a book last year, and and here we go. No. So what's going on with you? Well, today I woke up and had a dream that I lost everything. And here they go. And they're talking about their real experience. And with no need to explain it or to put a bow on it and figure it out. Yeah. You're just speaking about your experience. And when every man does it in a circle, there's this magic, I call it, that, the Spirit gets in all of it. And you don't need answers in that space. The experience itself informs you. But we speak from the heart, we listen from the heart to one another. We're spontaneous, we're not rehearsing, and we're lean of speech, and that just means we get to what really needs to be said. And so we do that. We do nature immersion, we do counsel, and then we spend time together, you know, in a larger communal perspective, really setting our intentions. What do you long for as a man? You know, with your family, with your work, your vocation, with your place in this world. And there's something powerful with men. We say we bond shoulder to shoulder. When we set our intentions, there's such a powerful support with that. By the end of the week, these guys all feel it, really. And I think that's the fear, is they'll go home and they won't have that anymore. But now that we've grown, we've got nearly 25 years, there is a community of men now that, globally even, that if you can find a partner on this journey and a support, and then hopefully even we encourage you, if you don't have one right where you are, go start one. And we give, you know, the tools, in other words, the practice of how we can cultivate that. But yeah, it's more of the same, really. Of what we do at the rites is going to sustain us outside the rites, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, so thank you, Jim, very much for this conversation.
I hope I said something helpful.
Yeah, and good luck for you and the team hosting this beautiful program you described.
Thank you so much, Georgi. You're very kind. Thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you. Yeah, so this was Spiritual Practices, how to find the right one. See you next time.